Along the lines of deconstructing the big picture down to components, I just want to go through and systematically learn or relearn how to draw each component, and then practice those things until, like we said in cherry blossoms, until they become innate and you're not thinking about how the leaf works or how the petal works. It just comes out naturally, and then you get to be more expressive. So what I want to do is start with the components of a peony, and that would be a leaf, a stem, and a flower. Stems are easy. I don't think we need to explain that. The leaves, on the other hand, people don't really know what to do, and so usually they'll draw the flower and then they'll just do pop out little triangles. What I want to do is understand the leaves separate from the flower and use the leaves just like you would anything else. So on a peony leaf, it seems to be kind of a long, kind of pointed oval. So this is in general what a peony leaf looks like. It looks like a bay leaf or a lot of other ones that look like that. What happens is there are multiple points that come out of the same stem. So you have basically your main stem or the center of the leaf, and then these multiple kind of long points. I like to, especially for drawing purposes, always do a slight S-curve, which we've talked about in the waves and everything else that we do. But instead of just doing a straight line or just an arc, which you can arc it, but I think that for the most part I like to do S-curves. Even though that's a subtle S, it's still an S-curve. You can use an arc and do it that way. Sometimes they split off from each other, so it looks like they come out as one, and then over time as the leaf grows it gets bigger, and then it splits into multiple points. I'm no botanist or a gardener, but I do have a couple of peony plants at my house. So if you understand the leaves before you draw the flower, I think that it's very helpful, because then you can use the leaves to support the outside edge of the flower and make it interesting, rather than just a circle with little triangles poking out from behind the flower. The other thing that happens in a peony leaf is the veins of the leaf, they don't come out. I'm going to use a different piece of paper here. So there's lots of different shaped leaves. You know, you have a maple leaf that kind of has 5 maple leaves kind of have 5 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 7 points. And here's the stem. They usually have, this is like your general maple leaf. And then you have like a rose leaf, which is almost like a spade. They seem to be kind of like a heart shaped, and the veins come out, lots of veins from the inside or to the out. So there's lots of different types of leaves. A cherry blossom leaf is about kind of like what we're talking about, but they have a lot of veins that come out like that. Now a peony leaf is a little different. The veins they do come from the center, but they're really long, so they kind of come down like this. And the only way to find this out, besides watching our videos, is to go look at the actual plants and leaves. And I learned this a long time ago trying to draw koi fish as a tattooer. I would end up looking at other pictures of tattoos that were koi fish, and I never knew the structure or understood the anatomy of a koi fish until I actually looked at the fish. And then I realized a lot of people don't draw koi fish very accurately. So anyways, this is the basic structure of the leaves on a peony. The second component to putting this together, I think, is drawing a bud, which is a young peony. And basically it's a circle or a ball. So you have a ball, and then as the stem comes up, the leaves come out from it. It kind of has these long, pointy leaves. So as the leaves they peel off of the ball or the bud, and then you have these, as it's opening, you can start seeing the layers of petals that are wrapped around each other. So in general, this would be a stem. Then you have these leaves that kind of peel off of it, and they're like small versions of the actual peony leaf. And then there's this ball of petals that's all condensed, and they're just layered upon each other. And this is where you're going to start seeing the edges of the petals start to be defined. So when you're drawing it as a tattoo, everything should have an aesthetic aspect to it. So you can exaggerate the curve of this. If you wanted to make it really ornamental, you could exaggerate everything that you see. You could have the leaf come out, go away from you, and then come back up and curl over and see the underside of the leaf. Or you could just have it kind of come out the way it actually is. That's where you have the opportunity to get expressive. But it starts by understanding the components and the anatomy of the flower, and then playing around with how you do it. So this outer portion would be leaves. They would be darker, they would be green. I know I'm using a red pencil. And then as you come in to the petals, that's where you get more into the color. But you have to think, as a young flower, this is going to be more green than red or pink or whatever color you're going to make the flower. Okay, so the final component would be the actual peony or the blossom. The way I start mine, I start with a larger ball. I will just kind of set that out there. That's going to be where the petals are unfolding off of. And then I usually just start with some S curves. And I think that it comes out best if you just kind of set out a couple S curves and then start building off of that. So what you want to think about is the way the petals are, they're coming off of that ball, that dense ball of petals, and then as they come off, some of them are staying curled up, some of them are folding back on each other. And so I start with that structure, and then you just start adding in the petals. Now the way you can do an edge, it can have just slight bumps. It can kind of have more pronounced bumps, or it can have actual loops that come back, and it depends on how exaggerated you want to make them. And that's where, by practicing each style, you'll be able to add your own style by the one that resonates the best with you. So I have my S curve here, and I'm thinking about the way the petal will come out. So as it's coming out, I'll start adding the little bumps, and then the way this petal comes and then flips over on itself, then it goes the other way. And I try to just get a natural rhythm to the way. You don't want it to be too patterned, or I don't want it to be too patterned. Some people do. You can loop it and then do a little backwards loop. Just think about the organics of the petals. I try to vary the direction or the size of each bump on each petal. You might want one to come in on, it's coming up and folding over, so it comes out. Basically, every time you have a petal, you have two sides to it, and when you're tattooing it, the more dynamic looking peonies have a darker side and a light side, or a warm and a cool side, and that's where you get the variation in the flower. So this petal, this is the back side of the petal, this is the inside of the petal, and that's where it's up to you what you want to color. If you want to put your lines on the inside of the petal or the outside, I like to vary that. So if I'm going to have lines or veins on the inside of the petal, I'm not going to do that on the outside because I want some contrast between the two. I want people's eyes to focus on the difference between the inside of the petal and the outside of the petal. Here's another one. I think in general, the older the petal is, so say you have the new petals are on the inside of the flower. As they're unfolding, they're going to get more and more weathered. The more weather that they endure, the more damage happens to the edge of the petal. And that's the thing that I think is funny, that people don't think of what they're drawing as real things. This is a flower that is growing out in nature. And so as it, on the outside, this is where bugs will get to it. This is where wind, water, and more damage happens. On the inside, you're going to have less damage, so these bumps are going to be a little more subtle. They're not going to be as pronounced as on the outside. So there's still the ball that you saw on the bud. It's just this bud is opening and all these petals are coming out and enduring the weather. And then you have some on the, you just keep layering it as far as you want to go out from there. I like to always think of keeping it organic, so I try to not have too many patterns or have it look too symmetrical. And just always remember, these petals are unfolding. So I look at the general shape of it and gauge whether it needs more petals here or there. I think that now it's just kind of that round circle look, but I can see that if you were to shade this, you have the back side of the petals. Say if I'm going to make the back side dark, I'll just go through and make a couple hatch lines just so I understand which ones are going to be dark, and then say the inside are going to be bright. So all I'm doing is making some marks and then judging whether that's enough. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 petals that are folded up. The rest of them are all the inside of the petal. And then you can do your veins, whether the veins are on the inside or the outside. And I like to vary the direction, so these are arcing this way, so this one I'll arc the other direction. So that's all different directions of where your eye is going to look. This is curving that way, that's curving that way. This one I'm going to curve the opposite. So when you color it, you could keep this really flat and just have some colored lines, and on the back side this could have a gradient from dark to light on the back side of the petals. There's not too many dark ones, but then remember the back side, the ball of petals on the inside, this is all going to be dark because it's still the back side of each petal. So these are the things that people, I think, often don't think about when they're drawing them. And no matter how good you are at lining or coloring or shading, if you don't understand the components and the general design and the anatomy of what you're drawing, you can't kind of make up for it with how good you can tattoo. So it comes down to how well you understand what you're drawing. Okay, so once you have your components, you have your bud, your leaf, and your flower, then you add the leaf to behind the flower. Instead of what people would normally do is just a little triangle of a leaf, and that's just not enough. That's the safe way out, but the thing is, this is all going to be bright colors, so you want there to be as much interest on the outside and as much contrast. So the more dark you have outside of these petals, the more it's going to support the brightness of the flower. And if you understand the components, if you understand the anatomy of each leaf, then you can picture it. So if the stem is coming down from behind this flower, say it's coming out here, and you have leaves coming out, you want to think about where they're coming from. So if this leaf is, here's a stem coming out here, and then it's going behind the flower, and an S curve up to here, you can have it come all the way out. Here's your flower, so you don't want just a circle on the person's body. Here's that general center stem that we talked about already, and then you want to start building that leaf. Remember, there's slight S curves, or you can do an arc, it doesn't have to be an S curve. And then remember, the veins of a peony leaf are long and they come from the center of the leaf but from pretty far back, so they come out really long. And that's where people are that's where you're gonna find the subtle differences between someone that knows what they're drawing and someone that doesn't. Someone that doesn't is just gonna put these little triangles poking out from behind the flower, but it's gonna stay a circle. If you have the understanding of the anatomy, then if you look at the outside edge of this, it comes in, out, out, in, and then it comes out far. And if you can picture the negative shape around the piece, it has a lot more interest when it comes farther out and farther in, because there's more distance for your eye to travel. You have a leaf over here, and this is where you can get more expressive, a big S curve. You can have the underside of each leaf. Practice the difference between an S curve and an arc. An arc is just like a C curve. An S curve starts in one direction, comes the other. And if you look at the interest of it, comes in and out all the way around that flower. I know this is kind of confusing the eye, but that's where you can take these things and take them farther out onto the body and give it a more aesthetic end.